Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hello, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
For the identity of the real Marty Levinson, please stay tuned to the Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that lemon light city, sweet Hope, Chicago. 224 446. Come on, baby, now get your business fixed. Come on, honey, don't you wanna go back to the lemon light?
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine show with Sonny Hirsch, our cameraman, and the greatest host around, Sonny Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Abby Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine. A presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the web, www.ntnm.org. Community policing, we're big on the whole idea. Community policing keeps changing. We'll be talking about some of that with our next guest. But caps24.org is a website that Sonny Hirsch made. Sonny Hirsch, in his spare time, is the chairman of the District Advisory Committee of the 24th District. And I happen to run the beat meetings for 2412. So we're fans. And, you know, we'll see, because every time there's changes in command, there's changes in everything just about. So anyway, politics time is over. It's time to get back into some community stuff. There's a lot going on with the police. Unfortunately, it's been very hard to get any real active police people on the show. And the main reason for that is it started with Mayor Daley, and Mr. Open Rahm Emanuel has followed through beautifully since. And even when News Affairs is all game and wants to put somebody on the show, it doesn't wind up happening. And it's not their fault. They're really good people, but they take their orders just like everybody else. So that's a too long an introduction. Well, it's not even the introduction. I'm going to introduce you to a former police sergeant, somebody whose acquaintance I made recently again on Facebook. He was a sergeant in 24, also our home district, which is Rogers Park, West Rogers Park, and the northern end of Edgewater. And Peter Koconis, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Why don't you give us your background, who you are, and...
I grew up in what they now call Edgewater. I've lived in this area my entire life. I grew up on Rosemont and Clark, and then I moved to over on Glen Lake. I became a policeman at 25. My dad had been owned a business at Ridge and Peterson and was shot by a gang from Senn High School. It was in a robbery and he was killed. And so my life of being a teacher and a coach thing sort of changed, and I became a policeman. And I worked in the old 20th District, which was in 24 now. Before 24 was, I worked there for 9 years. And then I worked downtown. Then I went to internal affairs, got promoted, then went to housing, and then went back to internal affairs. And then finally I came back here for the last 5 years of my career. And then I spent a month as a special assistant to the superintendent. And then I took my retirement and said, thank you very much. And I was on my way.
Which superintendent?
Jody Weiss.
Oh, very good.
Who I think was a hell of a lot better than McCarthy.
I will agree with that.
And he wasn't that good.
I will agree with that also. You know, it's funny. I still happen to think that the best commander we ever had was Bill Klein.
Yeah, Phil Klein was good. He had good, he was a cop's cop. Me, I lean towards Terry Hillard.
Okay.
I really like Terry Hillard.
Well, he's a quality individual.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I really liked him. He had a lot on the ball. He would show up at all these different places. He'd show up at the academy when we were testing recruits. He'd come to scenes of different incidents. I had some personal interaction with him on some cases I had. I really liked him, but I also liked Phil Klein also.
Yeah, Hillary he's a judge now, isn't he?
No, Hillard's the head of some security agency that advises the mayor on his superintendent picks and other things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, Hillard, and it's something else, but he's. I really liked him. He's a good guy, sharp, on the ball, street guy.
No, definitely. One of the things is every time they appoint a superintendent, I hate the idea, and this is me talking personally. I don't speak for his political opinion. You'll see he speaks very well for himself. So
Yeah.
one of the things I really don't like about, even though I hate to say anything good about Rahm Emanuel ever, not that I like the other side either, I don't, is that he appointed somebody this time that actually is a member of the Chicago Police Department. And how important is that?
Oh, I think at this juncture in the police department with the McDonald case and all this other negative publicity that we got, I think that it was foremost that a Chicago guy becomes the superintendent of the Chicago police. And I think this Johnson guy, from people that I've talked to and command people and people that are still working, they all agree that this guy's a really nice guy. He's a street guy. He knows what's fair, what's not fair. And he's the kind of guy that can lead the department. And the first thing the department needs under leadership is a partnership with the community. And I don't mean Rogers Park or Edgewater. I mean the entire city. There has to be some sort of a partnership between the police department and the communities. Not people like Jackson Sharpton or Father Flager that just want to throw fire on things. People that actually want to make a difference.
Oh, by the way, I don't know about Flager, but as far as the first two, don't forget the lining your pockets.
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I grew up in South Shore, and my father would tell me how in order to do business in certain places, Operation Push basically it was the equivalent of being shaken down.
Oh, yeah, it was just like a gang extorting you. You want to have, Jesse did it for the Budweiser franchise for his kids. This guy carried a lot of weight, but what has he ever done to help the police and the community except criticize and fight with? I used to be an old-time reporter from Channel 5, and I'll be damned if I can remember his name. Every now and then, people would surrender to him, and guys wanted on criminals. Huh?
Russ Stewart?
Is that who it was? I don't remember the guy's name.
I'm trying to remember too, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and he used to bring these people in. People trusted him, and I don't see any of the three aforementioned guys doing any of that and helping the community in any way. All they want to do is lead protests and say this and say that. There are some sad situations that have occurred, but you can't hold 12,000 members of the Chicago Police Department accountable for the actions of a few. And it's just, it's a sad situation. And if we can't get, and what Johnson wants is, if we can't get community to help us or help the police officers solve crimes, because you can't sit here and tell me that people on the west side and south side or in these rough neighborhoods, they don't know who the thugs are, they don't know who the gang leaders are, and they don't know who carries guns. It's an utter fallacy if anybody turns around and believes that. And, it goes to show you today in the newspaper, they show a picture of a young boy that was killed. And it's tragic, a 16-year-old boy loses his life. But this kid was carrying a gun. And they took a shot at the police, and the police shot him. My father was shot by a 15-year-old kid. So, I mean, 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds shoot you. If the families don't want to get involved and the community doesn't want to get involved, the police are not an occupying force. There's nothing we can do without help.
I agree. And one thing to point out, too, because you know what? You don't change your entire philosophy about how things work for an isolated incident here or an isolated incident there. Anytime you get a group of 12,000 people, even if they're screened, even if they're well-intentioned initially, there's always going to be a few bad apples. There's just too big a number for everybody to be perfect. You know, even if you had 1,000, nobody's going to tell me that 100% of 1,000 people are all going to be shining badges.
No.
It's impossible.
It is. No matter what job, no matter... I mean, you got big-time bank swindlers. You got everybody. You got Madoff. You know, everybody thought he was the end all in, and he robbed everybody, including his own family and friends.
Well, he kind of was the end of all that.
Yeah, he was for a lot of people's lives. But if you take 3% or 4% of 10,000 people, you know, that's not a lot. But when it's a policeman, it's a lot. When it's a politician... This Hastert case, you know, they want to give this guy just a child, you know, a alleged child abuser. They want to give him 6 months. My feeling is when the FBI asked him what he was doing and he lied to them, you lie to the FBI, it's 5 years. Give this guy his 5 years. I don't care how old or how decrepit or how bad he feels. They got hospitals in prison. Let the man go to prison. He's a pervert.
He is a pervert. He's probably going to get better health care in prison than most people get outside.
Exactly. You get 3 hops in a cot. You can be happy.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of people's attitude, you know, one of the things that really bothers me is the attitude people have toward the police, especially of late, and the news media in particular. I feel... I don't know if it's a vested interest. I don't know if they're being manipulated. I don't know if they're just stupid. Stupid is a good word for it because I do know a lot of these people. Okay, but the idea that you got a guy like Andy Shaw giving, you know, all his Better Government Association investigations seem to be centered on information that he gets from Tony Preckwinkle.
Right. That's the new power broker.
So he'll go against good, honest people if it pleases Tony Preckwinkle, who wants to be the new power broker. By the same token, Anita Alvarez, there's a story going around among the judges and the state's attorneys that the first meeting that Anita Alvarez had with their staff after the election where Tony Preckwinkle became president of the county board, she came in there and acted like she was co-running the department with Anita Alvarez, and everybody's jaw was on the floor. You know, it doesn't work that way. I never heard of the state's attorney or the sheriff or anybody else being the direct employee of the president of the Cook County Board.
Dart's too powerful. He comes from Madigan country. Dart's too powerful. Preckwinkle can't really mess with him. But if you want to take over a city or a country, you put your lawyers in place first, and you go from there. And Preckwinkle has done that. So, I mean, I have no doubt that she's going to be a mayoral run, or maybe even try a run for governor. But I think mayoral might be the one. But she has developed, she has become a powerhouse, and she put a state's attorney in that has absolutely no experience, lied on her resume, and then lied about a $25,000 survey that was done by Preckwinkle.
Campaign donation. She didn't even file that in her...
And that always amazes me. You have state reps, you have aldermen that get convicted of crimes in certain wards in this city, and they get expelled from the Senate or the House, and they get reelected. So if you're going to reelect leaders that have already been convicted of crimes, I mean, you're not improving anything. You mentioned something before about the Blackstone Rangers. Back when I was a young policeman in the 70s, there weren't the shootings that there were now. The El Rukins. Those guys, the leaders of the gangs, that they're in prison, and they're in prison for life for obviously good reasons. But they didn't let this indiscriminate shooting go around this city. They maybe were bad guys in the fact that they dealt drugs or that they did their own enforcing, but you didn't have 6-year-old kids and 9-year-old boys being assassinated. You didn't have that because they didn't want the heat from the police departments. Now you've got these gangs that broke into so many different factions. I mean, there's probably 21 or 22 factions of gangs just in Rogers Park.
Wow.
Just in Rogers Park, 22 factions of the Blackstones or the gangsters or the Black Gangster Disciples. You know, the one gang on Morris Avenue isn't necessarily the same group of guys that's going to be on Farwell, or the same group of guys that are going to be on Greenleaf, or that they're moving west further now. It's all a matter of policy and drugs. So if they're selling their drugs on Morris and you're selling your drugs on Greenleaf, you sure as hell better not come into their territory or they'll shoot you. And that's where the city, we need to get cooperation from the communities. And this, this cap stuff, I'm not a firm believer in that, and that's my opinion.
It's okay.
Because if we have a good CAPS meeting and the gang members come in there and they know what the people are complaining about, these people are actually afraid to talk about stuff because they have a gang member or a member of their family sitting in a meeting, and whatever they say is going to go back to them. So how can you protect that citizen that wants to fix things? How do you protect that policeman that sees something going wrong or sees corruption in a department and he wants to report it? And as soon as he does, he becomes a rat and he gets ostracized and he gets picked on and he gets harassed. And I've seen it, and I'm involved in something now in that kind of an instance where policemen's careers were ruined because they discovered while working undercover a group of corrupt policemen, of which 2 pled guilty and went to jail, and 8 were still left free to run and pillage the neighborhoods that they work and service.
Wow. Yeah, I do know some incidents in 24, but I'm not in a position to speak.
No, the most important people in this police department, and you can make Willie Lump can become superintendent of this police department. Your corps is the guys that wear the blue shirts, and the first line supervisors that are the sergeants. If they can get the community to respect them and the community to help them, these are the people that do the work daily on the street. When Bruce Rotner was the commander here, as a guy I've known since 1972, we were young policemen together, and we're still young. But it was a different world back then. We all backed each other up. We all did everything with each other. And we identified who was bad in our neighborhood, and we worked with the community to get these people out, whether force them out of their homes, whatever we had to do, we wanted to get them out. Have the landlord say, sorry, your lease is up, you're out. That's what we need to do here. Johnson's the superintendent. He's the figurehead. He can set up some policies. Escalante is the guy that runs the day-to-day operations in the police department. But then you have chiefs on the north side and the south side. You have commanders of the detective division. You have commanders in the districts. If the commanders in these districts can't get through to the police that wear those blue shirts or the white shirts, and can't get their morale back to where it should be, where I have a respect for my boss, and I know if I make a mistake is a mistake. You can fix a mistake. O.W. Wilson in 1960, when he came here with the babbling burglar scandal, Richard Morrison from the old 20th District, there's something I always remember, and I used to teach at the academy. Discipline should be used to educate, should not be used to punish. And that's something that we have to get across here. Everybody's not perfect. I made a lot of mistakes when I was a policeman. So did Bruce. So did we as we moved up the ranks. It's just a mistake. I mean, sometimes you make mistakes. You can't have 100% of the answers 100% of the time. You've got to make a judgment call, and it's a split-second call whether you kick down a door or you don't kick down a door. Either I make that decision, and then I say, I made the decision, I had my men do this, it's on me. But don't have the supervisor that says, yeah, go ahead, go through that door. And when the complaint comes, say, well, it was up to these guys. They should have known better.
Wow.
Sorry for the rant, folks.
I like rants, by the way. I'm very big on rants. Speaking of rants, when it comes to, we were talking before. By the way, you do stuff on WGN also.
Yes, I do. I sometimes I'm the Anna DeVlantis Rocon show. I'm their police expert, I guess.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I actually got, actually through Tom Dart, you were mentioning powerful people. He nominated me for community outreach with the Illinois Crime Commission one year. And Rocon's the one that actually gave me the award that year. Which is kind of cool.
I like him. They're pro-police, but they're also fair. If a policeman is a crook, he's a crook. That's just same and simple.
But the thing is, the other side isn't necessarily fair. Matter of fact, the other side, and yes, in my mind, that includes very much things like Black Lives Matter, where Tony Preckwinkle and Karen Johnson in Part 2 are hiring protesters. And, where do they protest? You protest at Mag Mile. Now, what does it have to do with police violence?
Nothing.
Where they protested. If they actually, they're actually disrupting private people's businesses, number one. Number two is, I don't understand why the press covers this stuff at all. It goes to show you what a bunch of whores they are.
If it bleeds, it leads.
That's true, and I learned that in journalism school.
Leads. Yeah.
But you know what? It's like the press themselves in the story will tell you that there were maybe 100 demonstrators. There were so many other places in the city where there were more demonstrators, but not as big a cause. Not as blatant a cause because it's not because it's bleeding. And any of them would not even be from in town. They were bought and paid for. There are professional people you can buy. And this is something I'm familiar with. You need a campaign force? You can buy a precinct organization. You can buy a protester. These things are...
Kim Foxx had Gator Bradley as one of her political advisors. I mean, there's a known gang member, and he's a political advisor in an election.
Yeah.
I mean, don't tell me that some people aren't using these gangs to get out the vote for them. That's absurd to think that they're not.
By the way, that's another thing, too. When I see these protests against the police, I have to wonder about how many of them are inspired, how many of the people in that crowd are gang members or people who's are part of a family whose livelihood is dependent upon these gang guys.
Exactly.
And I don't think people begin to realize that. One of my favorite, my favorite press event of the year, and you should talk to your guys on WGN about getting an invitation there if you want to see something interesting, is Tom Seraphin has an annual party the Tuesday before Thanksgiving for the press and politicians. There's over 1,000 people there over the course of just a few hours. Just about anybody who's anyone who's anyone is there. And there's a couple of people in particular I always like talking to. One is Bruce Stoll, who's now the editor-in-chief of the Tribune. So I happen to like John Cass. I don't agree with everything he writes, but I like John Cass.
He's Greek. You got to like him.
Anyway, he's got some good lamb recipes. I'll have to try one of these
He does.
days.
He's got great lamb recipes.
So in any event, he talks about something called the Combine, which is these big businessmen who basically determine the course of government in Chicago. I mean, there's something that's not necessarily dissimilar on a national basis also, but not quite the way it is in Chicago. So I asked Bruce Stoll, Bruce Stoll, there's a big difference, from the Tribune, when Bruce Rauner was running, whether he thought that Bruce Rauner was a member of this Combine. And Dole told me that he says it's impossible to become governor of the state of Illinois unless you're a member of the Combine.
Oh.
Okay. Now, the one thing he left out is, I'll bet you anything the Tribune's part of that Combine. And the Sun-Times, too.
Well, yeah, I mean,
know,
you got to get a source. You have to get your news.
Well, it's not just the source in the news, it's the money. I remember, you were talking about the 70s. I remember when there was a big scandal about the Sun-Times. Parky Cullerton, who was the assessor, a later convicted felon, Parky Cullerton, gave a $400,000 tax break to the Chicago Sun-Times. The Tribune, before...
Is Burke doing anything different than what Parky Cullerton did now? Is Madigan's law firm doing anything different than those guys?
No.
The big money companies and corporations go to these two guys.
No, it's true. And there's a reason why Burke's got a war chest of like $10 million or something.
It's absurd. But,
it's... the fact of the matter is, if you want to do business in Chicago and you want to be successful, it helps guide the way. You look, as right-wing as the Tribune usually is, you take a look at the piet that was paid for Barack Obama.
Huh.
They basically knocked out both his opponents with the opening up of their divorce papers. Now, why would the Tribune want to help a Democrat? Then they endorse a Democrat, of all things. That's something the Tribune never does. And that is because, the first guy to give his blessing to Obama was actually Richie Daley. If Richie Daley doesn't say, the Democratic Party in the state of Illinois supports you, he doesn't wind up getting anywhere. He was a nobody. They take their marching orders in part from the powers that be also.
Oh, absolutely. And, we were talking earlier before we shot, one of the biggest problems that this city has with our children is some of these kids, the only hot meals they get are breakfast and lunch at the school. If you can't afford little kids a roof over their head, a house, food, and education, they're going to get it from that gang.
Right.
And that's what causes the problem. And now they're holding the public school system hostage, and they're marching and demonstrating. They want more money. They want this. They want that. The bottom line is we have to take care of the children.
I agree. But let me ask you this. Given all the agencies that are out there to help, given various welfare things that are available to people, on a legitimate basis, are these people not feeding their children because they're the ones who are using the drugs from those gangs and just aren't tending to them?
Yeah, where is that money going? That's we don't have enough people to check up on who's getting the welfare, who's getting the link card, where the money's going, how the kids are eating, you see kids out at 2, 3 in the morning that are 10, 11 years old. We used to see kids all the time. They had nothing to eat. When cops, we used to take these kids to the Morris View restaurant on Morris Avenue.
Yeah.
Give this kid something to eat. If we can't establish anything or trust and a relationship with children, there's nothing we can do to improve what's going on in society today.
Well, yeah, there's a lot wrong with society. You know what? We've only got about a minute left. Otherwise, I'd want to get into how much. One thing I'll just say real quick, and we can talk about this the next time you're on. It kills me how at some of these CAPS meetings, the community, the police, everybody knows who the bad guys are, and you can't touch them.
Right.
But that will have to get to another time.
The community doesn't want to talk. That's what it is.
That's a big deal.
And there might be a fear quotient involved because they don't know who's at the meeting that's going to squeal on them.
Yeah. No, absolutely, that's the case. I want to thank you very much, Peter Koconis.
Thank you very much, sir.
Retired Sergeant, Chicago Police Department. Check him out as a police expert on the Rocon and Anna DeVlanta show, which is on in the mornings on WGN Radio.
3 to 7 in the afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry, 3 to 7 on WGN Radio. And I want to thank my entire technical crew, Sonny Hirsch. We'll be doing more police and community stuff for a few months. We'll also be hitting the Jewish festival coming up soon. And then, of course, for the fall, it'll be back to politics, and I'll have to buy extra Q-tips this time, but that's another story. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. Don't forget to check out all our stuff on the web at www.ntnm.org, communitypolicingcaps24.org. Thanks, Sonny. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.